Welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, the outdated Gen Z himself, and may I welcome you to an ongoing series I like to call Wags' Game War. This series has always been about a game versus another game. It's basically just me comparing these two games from a couple of predetermined categories I make up on the spot for each little matchup. So this time around, this is going to be a matchup of Super Mario Land versus Sonic the Hedgehog Game Gear. Let's just get this war started. Starting off with the gameplay here, Mario and Sonic as a whole always had very different gameplay to each other, but because these are old handheld titles in their respective series, the gameplay is even more different than what it would usually be. For example, with Mario Land here, it just controls like shit now. Mario's momentum is all whack, his jump feels really floaty, and as well, if you're not jumping, you fall down like a rock. But just like every other Mario game that was out at the time, all being just a basic 2D platformer, it does function exactly how you want it to. So it's all very recognizable at the end of the day, even if there are a couple weird control issues. But now onto Sonic the Hedgehog on the Game Gear. It is very similar to the Genesis version, just a little bit slower to match the hardware it's on. Now the thing is, Sonic does actually control really well here, even though that he's, you know, slower. But I'd say the only reason he feels slow is because the level design is mostly based around platforming, just like the majority of zones in Sonic 1 on the Genesis. But even worse, because with this game, the only speed-oriented level is Green Hill Zone Act 1 instead of the entirety of Green Hill Zone. But yeah, it's just not the biggest complaint ever. Sonic controls really well compared to Mario does in Mario Land. Only honest weird thing is the fact that Chaos Emeralds are found around the stage instead of in special stages, and even weirder, there are special stages in this game, but they're just used to collect rings for points and also find continues hidden around it. It's just very weird. But yeah, I'm gonna be honest, I'm gonna give this category to Sonic 1 on the Game Gear. It just makes sense. Sonic controls well, the game functions well. I mean, Mario Land functions good as well, but it's just not as tight feeling as Sonic 1 on the Game Gear is. But now let's move on to the art style. Both of these games had to be very, very limited with what kind of graphics show on the console because of the hardware. But both of these games, I honestly think they did really incredible. Mario Land, although very, very simple graphically, I think it fits perfectly with the Game Boy. It doesn't push the hardware too much where the game actually needs to be running really slow, or as well the game doesn't need to be zoomed in. It just perfectly takes this simplistic art style and lets the game function really well, even though that there are some issues with Mario, but it's about art style, not gameplay. But yeah, I just really like the look of Mario Land overall for being just a little simple Game Boy title. Even though that I never played it on original hardware, and I'm sure I'll get lots of more love for it if I ever played this game on original hardware, but I always appreciated it for what it was back when I first played it on the 3DS Virtual Console. But Sonic 1 Game Gear kind of goes for pushing the hardware a little bit, and then the game has to be running super zoomed in and you barely see anything in front of you. I think it's just a small price to pay. I love the look of this game. It has lots of colors for a little 8-bit console. It really feels like that they just shoved a Genesis title into an 8-bit console, and I really like it for that. It just looks really, really good, but I do think that future Sonic Game Gear games definitely push the art style a lot more, so I'm just gonna give this a category to Mario Land, mostly because although I like the Sonic 1 Game Gear art style, it's a lot better in the later Sonic Game Gear games. Let's move on to the music here. Now, although these games, you know, run 8-bit soundtracks, I honestly love it for that. I'm a pretty big fan of 8-bit soundtracks. Mario Land here, I think, has a really incredible soundtrack for the Game Boy. The music just hits really damn hard, and it weirdly feels different, but in a good way compared to the other Mario titles out at the time. And even weirdly, instead of the normal Starman Invincibility theme we all know, I think it uses a Game Boy rearrangement of classical song, which I think is really funny, and I like it for that. So hats off to the Mario Land soundtrack. It's really, really good. Now, Sonic 1 Game Gear, on the other hand, also a really good soundtrack, but this time around, instead of it feeling different like how Mario Land did, it feels very, very exactly what you would expect out of the Genesis titles, but now just on an 8-bit console. Which isn't a bad thing, it just feels a lot more been there, done that with the soundtrack, and the game also has an unused 8-bit rearrangement of Marble Zone, which is actually really cool. It makes me really wish that there would have been Marble Zone in this game, but it just never turned out, sadly. But I'm gonna be honest, I like the different feeling soundtrack Mario Land 1 had, so I'm gonna give this category to Mario Land. So I know this is going to be a weird category at first, but just hear me out as I move along with it. Both of these games are very, very charming. They have this sort of charm because they're old handheld titles. Like, these were the kinds of games at the time that you can play on handhelds. They weren't on par with consoles like the now current Nintendo Switch and Nintendo Switch 2, or even like Steam Decks and all of that. Like, these games were all you got, and there's just a certain charm to them, you know? Like, there's no other word to say other than charm. So Mario Land, I think you can tell which one's gonna win already, but has this really huge charm about it because it literally takes the Game Boy hardware and doesn't push it to its limits, but just goes with what the Game Boy can perfectly run. And I really love it for that, and even though Mario himself controls like absolute fucking shit, there's just something special about that, you know? And even with the Super Ball Flower as well, it's just a Game Boy hardware limitation of, yeah, we don't feel like pushing the Game Boy to its limits by making a normal Fire Flower like every other Mario game out at the time. We're just gonna make this Fire Flower alternative that is less pushing on the Game Boy's hardware. And I really love it for that. And the fact that this game is really short, there's 3 levels per world, and there's only 4 worlds as well. And there's just something about that that's just like, yeah, it's perfect for handheld play. And still to this day, I think Mario Land is very special to what a handheld game should be. Like, even though that there's these full, huge games now that you can play on the go, like Mario Odyssey on Switch, for example, you can bring that on the go, but it's still a console game at heart, and that's why I prefer to play that game on the TV, because of the way that the Switch works. But Mario Land feels perfect for handheld play. Even though that everyone wants to have all of their big AAA console titles on the go, it's not like you're actually going to be playing those kinds of games on the go. You're just going to be playing them for 5 minutes, and then you're going to be like, man, yeah, this was a waste of time. Why did I have this full, huge, expansive game like Skyrim on the go? Like, I'm not going to be playing it like that. Mario Land has this perfect, I'm made to be on the go, and I really love it for that. And Sonic 1 Game Gear as well definitely has that handheld feeling as well, but I feel like they definitely tried to shove a Genesis Sonic title into a handheld, and I do think that it's more of a console game compared to a handheld game. And this game did release on the Master System at the same time, so I do think at heart it's more of a Master System game over a Game Gear game. But there are still some cases that, yeah, you can tell it was more prioritized as a handheld game first, I'd say personally, because the game is definitely shorter than a normal Genesis title. Like, the levels are a lot shorter, even though that they are a lot slower because they prioritize platforming over speed. But the game overall is still shorter than a Genesis game, but it just feels like a Genesis game still, which is why I'm giving this category to Mario Land, because it's basically a perfect example of a platformer made to be played on the go. And I love it for that. There we go, it seems like Super Mario Land won this little war right here. Now, even though that Mario Land did win this war, I do still think, personally, that Sonic the Hedgehog Game Gear is a lot better overall, at least as a game. But as a handheld game, yeah, I do find Super Mario Land to be a lot better for the hardware it's on, so that's why Mario Land won. So yeah, I hope you enjoy my bad opinions, and I'll see you in the next one, and the one after that.